This is the Brandon Smith Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. So today we've got a really special guest. I am so excited. I'm going to introduce him in just a second, so I'm not going to let the cameras pan over to my secret special guest yet. But for our topic today, we were talking about what we're going to talk about, and we actually settled on a couple topics. So today we're going to talk a little bit about leadership in different kinds of environments, so corporate world, nonprofit world, some of the challenges around that. And then we're going to take a natural pivot, and you'll see why in a minute. We're going to talk about people change and how do you get people to change, and how do you support and love on people when they're in those difficult places in life. So with that as my teaser, I now get to introduce Jim. So Jim Reese is our guest today. Jim, so glad to have you here.
Thrilled to be here. Really looking forward to it.
I am really thrilled. I mean, your story and just your presence and everything how you approach life, I think this is going to be a great show. I'm probably setting the bar too high.
Yeah, so I'm going to say,
it's way too high here.
Yeah, hope I don't trip.
So, Jim, you're the CEO of Atlanta Mission right now.
That's correct.
Okay, so talk to us a little bit about what Atlanta Mission does, and then I want to go back into kind of your story and how you got here.
Yeah, so Atlanta Mission's been around 80 years. Today, we serve about 1,000 men, women, and children across 4 campuses each and every day. We deal with people who are facing homelessness. So we'll have single men, we'll have women that are single, and we'll have women with their children. And in each of our campuses each day, our goal for them is truthfully to take a person who's on the street to choose help. And from that, ideally, engaging them in a place where they want to make progress, trying to get to 3 outcomes. We want them rooted in community. We want them to be able to retain employment, and we want to be able to secure housing.
Talk about people change. I mean, that is, if we were to really boil it down to what is one of the most challenging elements to kind of reset someone's life, I don't think we could find a better example than what you do.
No, and the truth is the complexity of what they face physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and vocationally is enormous. And most times people trying to deal with change want to deal with one aspect of life. The problem with the people we serve and the challenge we get to work on is how do you deal with all of those, because they're so interconnected.
Yeah, they got housing and food and job and health and relationships and you name it. It's all up for grabs.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge they face, Brandon, truthfully, is relational poverty, not financial poverty. And that is what really you have to get to a place relationally to begin to work almost on any of those areas.
Yeah. And I know so much of the research today, and I've even seen you speak, and you've even talked a bit about it. Yeah. It's all about the impact and the significance of loneliness and what that can do to us in life.
Yeah, it's hard to understand. If you can imagine your life with no friends, a very common thing that the homeless men would say is, no one talks to me. And so just imagine your life in a bubble walking around with nobody there with you. You're on the street, nobody speaks to you. What can you think about yourself?
That would be incredibly painful, which then I would see naturally why people might self-medicate.
Yes, exactly.
Because that's so painful, walking through life that way. I don't want to feel that.
Right. And so any way to put that down, and usually they've gotten to that place, not overnight. There's been other circumstances that kind of become these steps to get to the place where I give up and I just can't do it. And truthfully, being by myself, not being in relationship is better for me than it is to be in relationship, because every time I've been in a relationship, I've been hurt, or maybe I've even hurt somebody else.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm part of me is tempted to go down the path of, okay, how do we turn that around? Yeah, but I don't want to do that yet. Right. I want to hear about how you got here. So let's kind of go back in time. Tell us your story.
Yeah. So, first, I would never in a million years expect I would have been at the Atlanta Mission. And so, I grew up in Michigan. My dad left when I was 5, kind of very dysfunctional family. I was a firstborn, so overachiever for me, and so I was going to escape that. So my whole kind of life was built along, if you performed at a high level, you were going to be there. I was a state champion in tennis, probably not as good in skills, but I just outworked everybody else. So that kind of became a pattern a lot for my life. And then I would truthfully end up marrying my high school sweetheart, get divorced a couple years later, break my heart about that. And then went to school at night, was working for General Foods, and which I think was God's way for me, to be honest, to learn what I didn't know by the way I grew up. By being in work, I was kind of almost getting an MBA, though it was my undergrad. And so the great part for me, General Foods was great. I was with them 16 years. From there, went to work actually for Frito-Lay, where I ran operations. So I was a marketing degree guy, but kind of in the world of operations, so primarily with engineers.
Wow.
And I think the advantage was I love to learn, so I could learn a lot from engineers, and they have trouble lots of times coaching and leading people. And so I was kind of this great match for the two of us. And so we moved to Atlanta 27 years ago with Frito-Lay, where I ran operations for them, for the South Division, which was fabulous and hard and all that. And then Honey Baked Ham, and then prior to coming to Mission, I was CEO of Randstad, the Dutch staffing company, which was interesting when I look back at what I was doing, in that I spent a huge amount of my career in packaged goods around food. And then I spent 7 years of my career around helping people get work. Kind of interesting how God would kind of say, okay, here's the guy that could do that. And it was, even when I was at Randstad, the thing that excited me about being in the staffing business, because it was such a difference from packaged goods,
it's so
was that
different.
we put people to work. And you could see what it meant to somebody who was so in need of a job to get a job. And that's what I loved about it. In fact, we kept track of how many people work. So in the United States, as an example, when I was CEO, we had 66,000 people that were working across the U.S. And so we talked about how many people did we put to work, because that's what really got you excited.
Wow, that's fantastic. So then you were doing that, and you kind of had this corporate career and been successful and had impact on leading people and helping people. But there's a right turn somewhere in this, Jim. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I left Randstad, truthfully, just exhausted. And I think for all, you're talking to a lot of leaders. It's this, you kind of get in this treadmill, and the treadmill is going faster and faster and faster, and you don't really realize how fast it's going until somebody unplugs it. And so when I left as CEO of Randstad, I literally slept 14 to 16 hours a day for the first 30 days. I would have had no idea I was that tired, but I was that tired. And so I took a little time off, lost both parents. So God's timing was good for me in regards to being able to spend time with my parents. But I wasn't sure what I was going to go do. I had a lot of people wanted me to go run businesses, and I loved business, and I love business. I still serve on boards of a couple of private equity companies. And at the same time, I love ministry. And so a guy who was with Spencer Stewart, who is now doing search for nonprofits and ministries, called me and said, hey, I think I got the perfect job for you at the Atlanta Union Mission. We were at that time. What do you know about it? And Brandon, I knew nothing. I'd never been, never served, never gave, nothing. And because I trusted him, I said, well, I'll come and talk to you, Sam. And so I spent about 4 hours with him on a Friday afternoon. And I still was very, very apprehensive. But I said, I came home, talked to my wife, and said, let's just go through the process if this is what God wants me to do. Even though I would say I probably believed it was a 10% chance I would do it. And that's probably high, probably 5%, to be honest. But as I walked through the process and began meeting the people and visited the centers, God kind of ended up saying 3 things to me. Number one, I want you to be fully dependent upon me, which is kind of easy preaching and hard living, at least for me. 2, I'd spent my whole...
It's only you, Jim. You're the only one that struggles with that. Everybody else has got this figured out.
Which was, again, so, when you think about it, so important for the work we do, because we tell people every day he's enough. So if I don't believe he's enough, how can I lead an organization that tells people he's enough? And so when I look back, prior to it's unbelievable that I would have had, because never in my careers did I ever have this kind of clarity of why I was called to a job. So I want you to be fully dependent on me. 2, I built great teams and great organizations, and I love watching organizations and people perform at high levels. And a frustration for me in ministries is the lack of that. And I thought, if we could do that for the poor, could we really change the way the work was done? And then 3rd was he just, I felt like almost like he looked at me and said, people want you to go do a lot of stuff right now. Would you give that up and go serve a least? would you answer my call and serve at least? And so, gosh, I still get choked up every time I think about that. And so, so I joined, and I've been there 10 years now, which is unbelievable.
10 years, wow.
And so, I think there's a lot of curiosity about why oh man, you did this. And, and people probably on both sides thinking I was crazy and during the height of my career to leave what I left. But hey, I love the work. It's the hardest job I've ever had, but I can't imagine my life without it.
Okay. Awesome story. Awesome. Okay. All right. So I'm looking over at the clock as I'm ready to dive in here. So as I teed up for the show, I want to spend a little bit of time first on some of your learnings in leading in different environments. Yeah. And then we'll pivot and we'll talk about people change and what can we do to kind of love on others or support others to help them change, whether they're folks dealing with kind of the challenge of homelessness or just people in our lives.
Yeah.
So you had this whole corporate life. And then you made this pivot into kind of this hybrid kind of ministry, nonprofit kind of world. What's been your biggest surprise or learning in that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is that in the corporate world, the resources you have to train and develop people and the training and development that is taking place with people. So when one of the biggest challenges for me come into mission. So in the business world, you get in a table, you sit around it, you agree what you want to go do, you clap hands, you break, and you go off and do it. At the mission, we sit around a table, we want to go change something, everybody turn on the table, clap hands, and they'd go, how do we do it? And so it was this unbelievable challenge that before we could make significant change, every time you'd have to step back and train. Didn't have the skill sets to do it. Great people, great hearts, but a tendency never to develop the skills that they would need to be able to do that kind of change. And it was just, so for me, incredibly wearing because you'd realize, it'd take longer than you'd think. And so that was a huge component for me that was there, really giving people that opportunity to be prepared. And then the second thing I would say, in the business world, you're always shooting for 100%. It's just, you're trying to get to excellence in that. What I learned in the ministry world, and not because people don't care, but there tends to be this tendency of anything better than 0 is good. And so in the business world, you get 96, you're trying to get to 100. In the ministry world, you're at 25 or 40, and you feel good about being at 40 because anything you accomplished wouldn't have got accomplished if you hadn't done it. And that to me was this kind of, oh my gosh, this is just terrible thinking. How do we begin to get to that? Part of it is what do you use for measurements? How do you be able to take a hard look at that? And the other is how do you move in people's mind that they have more capacity to do more? And I believe God's calling us to do more. So that was one of the other big things for me. It was like, why is it that I see all these opportunities and many times people didn't see the same opportunities?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. As you were talking, you probably noticed I was smirking. So I'm going to pose to you when we come back from break. One of the big things that happens to me when I work in kind of the ministry world or the nonprofit world and try and help people change, kind of the way I get labeled. And I'm going to pose this to you and see if you ever got labeled that way and how you've overcome that. So let's stay tuned. We'll be right back after break. Hey, this is Brandon with your Coaching Minute for the week. So I've got a tip for you that I put on most of my clients' action plans that you may think it sounds a little crazy. So hear me out. I want you to designate one of your colleagues or coworkers, somebody maybe works in a different department that maybe a peer of yours that you don't work with every day. And I want you to intentionally plan on having lunch with one colleague or coworker a month. So all I'm asking for is one lunch a month. And you may say to yourself, Brandon, that's such a waste of time. I don't have time to have lunch with people. But what I have found for my clients that's been able to do this is they come back and they say, not only was it so valuable to learn more about them as a person, I learned really important stuff going on in their departments. And they learned important stuff going on in mine. And we were able to share information, and we both agreed it was a really good use of our time. So that's my challenge to you. Designate a day of the month that you're willing to go out to lunch with a coworker. Go find one. Go out to lunch, and I promise you're going to be glad you did. It's going to help you be more productive, operate more efficiently and effectively, and strengthen some of those relationships that we all need. So that is your coaching minute for the week. Until next week, I can't wait to hear how it goes. Welcome back from break. This is the Brandon Smith Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith. And today we're talking with Jim Reese, and he is the CEO of Atlanta Mission, and we are talking about a whole bunch of things, Jim. Yeah. We're talking about moving from the corporate world to the nonprofit world and God's call to have you move into that space. We're talking about people change in lots of ways. And actually, on that topic of people change, you were talking about, the question I posed to you right before break was, what was the big learning or big surprise you had going from corporate your entire career to now this nonprofit ministry kind of world? And you mentioned some of the kind of observations you had. Now, when I have gone into those environments, and I start to say, well, gosh, it's healthy to have put in place some of these structures, I get labeled this: you're too corporate. You're being corporate, as if that's a reason not to do it. Did you ever get labeled that, or did that ever happen?
All the time.
Okay. And so what was your ration? How did you overcome that defensive? Because my experience was, it was really just a defensiveness. I was making people feel uncomfortable about change. They weren't comfortable with the change. And so it was easier to kind of label me this way rather than kind of look at the change.
Yeah. So, it was, for me, the way that I've worked to overcome it, and not to be confused that you ever totally overcome it, because I think there's still some sense of that. Now, I've been there a long time. The part that was crazy to me, to be honest with you, when I came, I thought the place I would get people would believe the most was my leadership skills, and that the question would be the spiritual side. I didn't get credit on either side.
You didn't get credit on
either side. So it didn't matter. And it's just the way it worked, And I thought, I've done some reasonably good sized things. But, I think the thing that I found was pointing to, in our case, what was best for the client. And so if we would wrestle with the question, so that you couldn't argue that if anything we were doing or the structure we were doing would better serve the client, because their passion was to serve the client. I was going to try to get them to use a structure that would help us better serve that client.
Okay, so I want to go back to something real quick.
Yeah.
You're now using the word client.
Yeah.
Did you? I'm assuming you brought that into the conversation.
Yeah. So and so for our people, that's who we serve. We call them clients. Sometimes we call them guests, depending on where they were at.
Was that always the case for the mission before you got there, or was that something you started to kind of bring in?
Well, they would call them that, but the truth of the matter is, we served ourselves more. We were not client focused, to be honest with you. Yeah. In fact, one of the things I would say is, if the client messed up, it was their fault. If we messed up, it was their fault. It was never our fault. And so as we went through the transition of changing our model, it was flipping that the client was at the top of our organization structure, and what were we doing to serve them? So, I had people with a great passion to serve these clients. And so for me, the way you kind of got out of the corporate thing, let's keep focusing on that. Now, to be honest, there'd be times, Brandon, same thing. You're doing a performance review process. Oh my gosh, this is way too corporate. We want to just keep it simple. Everybody gets the same. No. Because again, I'm going to say to you, developing you is really key. Do you want to grow? Yes, you want to grow. We use the process to be able to do that. And so, I think if you went in the mission today, and part of it is we've brought, people in from the business world and people from the ministry world on both sides. I would say we're a hybrid of both. And I really believe, as a leader, and I think this gets to one of the cores of leadership, there's this sense you can't love people and get great results. And so leaders tend to focus on one or the other. So I see a lot of leaders who will get so focused on caring about people, and they'll get terrible results, which meant you just failed the people.
Yeah.
And then there'll be people who are all about the results, and they will kill the people. And they'll feel great about what they do, and the organization burns out, and they're not able to sustain. I think one of the biggest things I learned when I was at Frito-Lay, because in PepsiCo, incredible high expectation on results. And when I came in, I have this heart for people. And to be honest, people thought, he's not going to make it. He cares about people. He won't be able to get the results. And so for me, truthfully, it was kind of this challenge. I think you can get both. There is no reason you can't care about people. In fact, I believe a servant's heart is the way you really lead. And but you got to focus for the purpose of getting to results, or it doesn't matter. Just serving people without trying to get to what you're trying to accomplish is not really doing much.
So what I heard in all this, and I think this is a good takeaway for people that are either, whether they're in the ministry world, nonprofit world, even corporate world, is when you were going into that and you were experiencing that resistance, like, who is this guy? What does he know about our world? Rather than defend yourself, you said, let's make it about the client who we're serving, and let's make it about you and helping you grow as a person and professional. You took that angle. Make it about you, and we'll make it about the people we're serving. And sounds like people responded positively to that.
Well, and I think if we think about it, the truth of the matter is nobody cares in many ways what I've done. They want to see with what you've done, what's that going to matter here? And so leaders do have a tendency to bring their past press clippings. They put them on the table and think everybody ought to follow. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. So let's now segue into, we talked a little bit about people change in the organization.
Yeah.
Okay. And now let's talk about just people change kind of with the heart of it with your clients. And we think about those men and women that are at a place in life where everything is up for grabs. What have you seen as ways to help them make that pivot? And then I'm going to ask you some questions about then what can we all do?
Yeah.
Both me and everyone listening to this show.
Well, I think for us, what we've seen, number one, is you have to begin to create a relationship to create some sort of trust that you're really in this with them and for them, and that's really important to you, because they come with an unbelievable belief you're not. They don't see the world as people are for them. I mean, they think the world is against them. They might not be able to sort out whether it's for them or against them because of something they've done or something done to them, but they don't start with that place. So first of all, it's beginning to treat them as a person and caring about them. And they're gonna test you. They're not gonna start with that. So you ask them a couple questions, they're gonna think, well, I've been asked a couple questions before. Are you gonna stay with them? Are you gonna show up again? Are you gonna keep coming back? Is this a one and done? Because that's what they've had. I tell people all the time that help us serve people, you have no idea the value of you showing up, what that means to them for somebody who's never shown up. Because truthfully, they've been promised by people most of their life that they would show up and they didn't. So first, do you begin to create this thing, I'm going to show up. And by the way, you're not going to do something that's not going to make me show up. Because sometimes they'll do something just to see how you would respond. Are you going to scare you? What's going to happen? Well, and the thing that you see is no. Or I'll see it when they'll tell your story.
Yeah.
And you'll go, when you hear the story, you want to go and run in the corner and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this story. But you can't. You got to just listen to the story. It's their story. And so as you begin to do that, they begin to trust you. And as they begin to create that relationship, you get a chance to begin to talk to them about, what are some of their dreams? And I think one of the things that started us down the whole journey really of changing the way we deliver our service model was, for me, watching men line up every day and come out every day and knowing God had a bigger plan. And the part for me, it's kind of, I don't care whether it's a homeless person, a person that works for you in a corporation, it's people have this unbelievable desire to do more and dreams. And part of us as leaders, or part of us as we serve, is how do we help get that out of you? How do we inspire you? How do we give you that? And so the building of the relationship is nothing more than beginning to create a relationship to help you discover what's inside of you. And you've not done anything that can prevent you from doing that in the future. And a burden that they all carry is this unbelievable condemnation of what they've done in the past. And so that condemnation is just so strong. And what I love in the scripture, so everybody knows John 3:16. So God loved us so much, He's sent His Son. Well, 17 says He came not to condemn the world. And I think the reason He said that was we would run to condemnation. So even when we knew He loved us, the heavy weight of where we have failed stands in our way. And so I think for so many of our people, even with that relationship, break down that barrier that you're not going to condemn them. You're going to love them. Yeah, you know what? That had to be really hard. I'm still going to love you. Had to be really bad. Yeah, I'm going to love you. You're going to keep showing up, Jim. Yeah, I'm going to keep showing up.
Okay, so I want to make sure I heard this right, Jim. Okay, because you gave a lot of richness in that. So I'm hearing part of it is at the fundamental level, it's the relationship, building that relationship and being with people. But if we go into the more complexity of that, it's showing up consistently, predictably, and as a good mentor of mine would say, be prepared for love tests. Right, you're going to get love tests.
Yeah,
right?
Excellent way to put it.
And
absolutely perfect.
And they're going to want to see if you're going to run away like everyone else has. So rather, it's easier for them to push you away than have you surprise them and run away. So they're going to do that. So in the face of a love test, really not only sit there, but go into it.
Right.
Kind of lean into it and ask questions and be more fully present. And then that's where they'll be more willing to share dreams and have that kind of come out as part of the relationship. Did I miss anything? Did I get that?
Yeah, I'm going to steal the love test thing. I love it. I love it. That's no, because
you could ask somebody, is that love test? Yeah. Are you doing a love test? Right. I don't know if you should do that with your wife.
Right. No. I probably won't.
Is that a love test?
Right. I'd fail too many of those probably. Yeah, you're right. But and that's, Brandon, it's so true because they really need somebody to believe in them before they can believe in themselves. And they won't say that initially, but as time goes on, I've heard many of them say, I need you to believe in me before I could believe in me, because the risk to believe in themselves is much higher. But when they see someone else will believe in them, okay, you know what? I'm willing to take the risk and I think it's almost, it's their love test question, but it's like they're going to be with me. And So kind of,
I love the word inspire because it comes from the root to breathe spirit into someone. So it sounds like you've got to, for part of that process, breathe your spirit, breathe a spirit into them.
Absolutely, and help them discover what they want to work on. One of the biggest challenges in the space we work and the complexity we work is we look at somebody and decide what they need. Well, how do we do when somebody does that for us? Terrible. So we will tend to look and see something physically they need, and then they'll know immediately we don't understand them. So I'll look at you and say, you need a pair of shoes, right? And then I'll go get you, and they'll go, you're an idiot, Jim. I don't need a pair of shoes. If you think that's what I really need, you might think I need a pair of shoes.
Yeah. So I just had a little chill as you were talking because I thought to myself, everything you're saying, while it's absolutely true with our brothers and sisters that are facing homelessness, it's true for our children, it's true for our coworkers, it's true for our neighbors. If we approached everybody with that same spirit and intention, I think the world would be a better place.
Well, and Brandon, the thing that's true is that the people we serve just are there because of circumstances that got them there.
Yeah.
And they are somebody's mom, somebody's brother. They've been somebody's coworker. And so you're exactly right. It is not unique to them. And that's why I think you can, part of what God used for me was the skills of coming from business, applying it and being able to look at, my heart and care for people. It's just we're serving a different person with a different problem, but it's coach them, develop them, love them, care for them, give them a bigger vision of what they could have for themselves.
So one last question, then we'll start to move towards close. So that you gave a great kind of roadmap of when you're really willing to walk with someone and you have the time and ability to walk with them over time, how to help them change. How about those moments when we're passing someone who's homeless on the street? What are some things we can do in that moment? Often, there's my wife and I were talking about, there's that tension. Do we give them money? What are things we can do to acknowledge and support them? What would you advise?
So number one, won't cost you anything, and probably one of the biggest things you can do, say hi to them and look them in the eye. Next time you walk down the street, I want you to watch people walking by homeless people. And I want you to see how many people ever look at them or ever even recognize them or say anything to them. So number one, just look at them in the eye, say hi to them, say something to them, but just recognize they're there. So that's number one. Number two, I get the question all the time, what do you do? Do you give them money? Do you not give them money? I think one is, my tendency is to say you don't give them money, but I would also tell you I've given people money. I think you got to kind of just, the Lord's going to lead you in that. Be wise. I mean, you do have to be wise, and you got to discern where you're at. I think one of the things I tell people is, ideally, if you have the time and you feel it's safe and it's in a good environment, and they say they're hungry in particular, because that's going to be the thing. We respond to people being hungry. We don't want anybody to be hungry. That's why they use those words. So give them a card to get something to eat, or if you have the time, go sit and hear their story a little bit. I will tell you, the food will nourish them for a few hours, and your conversation will stay with them for weeks.
Wow. Okay, well, our time's already up. So if I ask all my guests this question. So if you could give us one, I feel like you already have, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If you could give us one life hack, a way that we could help prevent or eliminate dysfunction in our lives, personally or professionally, what would that be?
I think be that inspiration and see more in people than they might see in themselves. Look for that area you see they have that they might not see they have, and really encourage them in that, because there's nothing more rewarding than hearing years later, you saw something in me I didn't see.
Yeah.
And I used it.
Fantastic. Be that light in the world. Jim, you're a gift.
Oh,
you're a
thanks.
gift. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh.
I mean, your story.
Thank you for what you do.
This as well. It's. I get to meet cool, inspirational guys like you and women. So it's fantastic. So anyway, as we're starting to move towards close, what would you say is a way that we can continue to follow you or support you in the good work that you're doing?
Yeah. So go to our website, atlantamission.org. You can learn about the work we do and get a chance. And I would tell people, go there and watch the stories, because you're going to see how lives can be transformed. And if you just need a little encouragement, listen to those stories, and you're going to get a chance to do that. You can always give. We always need help. We get no government funding. We do all this work because of generous donors.
So no government funding. For some reason, I thought there was some funding. No, okay.
No, none. And we're able to do that, and we couldn't do it. And so all of our donors out there, I say thank you to you. And but see something in somebody they don't see, and let them know.
Yeah. Fantastic. Awesome. And thank you for listening and watching the show. Of course, keep up the fight against dysfunction every week. You can follow us on Twitter at the WP Therapist. And of course, we drop a new show every single week. If you're listening on iTunes and you haven't, you could do me a tremendous favor and all of us a tremendous favor if you could go on iTunes and rate the show. Would love to get a sense of kind of what you think we could get better at. And so please let us know. We're always looking to improve. And until the next show, have a great week and an awesome life.